All right, today our deadlines are for our individual presentations are going to start and for assignment 6, our text and poster design. So I'm going to go right to assignment 6. And this is an important assignment because it brought together a lot of the digital skills we've learned so far, right? And what are those digital skills? If we look through our exercises and our assignments, we first learned compositing. Then we learned vector graphics. Then we learned vector line art and digital coloring. And then with this assignment, we're learning vector type design. And then we could composite a background behind it with our spot illustration and kind of compiling all these things together. This is not just used for posters. So I guess I should point this out on the assignments page. It's also very heavily used nowadays for what's called key art. So it used to be a really, really good art job, creative job, to do poster design or album covers or DVD covers or all of that was printed and put on physical products. But now those same artists are still doing that kind of stuff, but they're also, the work that actually is seen by most people is what's called key art. So I have linked under assignments an article about what key art is, because this has changed just in the last 10 years. So key art is what shows up in all those browsing menus, on all your streaming services, right? On all your media services, whether it's for video games and Steam, or whether it's for programming like Netflix, or Max, or Paramount, or Hulu, right? And you'll notice that all of the key art, which is dynamic as a resource instead of a printed poster, which is static, is that it will change every 6 months or so. Why? Because it's trying to use the art to get new attention, right? So if it shows up on Netflix for 3 years, it might go through 6 different versions of key art to get you to pay attention to that show. And what do they usually use to do that? Well, sometimes if we look at Why the Last Man here, which was not a very good show, but was an excellent comic, we see a play of positive and negative space used in like a black logo type or a black iconic logo kind of image as the full key art illustration, but just in black and red. And then the logo type along with a pictorial logo. So this is called a combined mark for the series. And that's something that's used for almost all of them. They have what's called the title flag, which is like the logo type for that series, just like you would have it on a book jacket or on a comic book cover. And then they will have the key art that changes, but it always has to accommodate for the design of the type. So lots and lots of examples. And we're just going to see more and more of this. So here's some examples of different ones for Breaking Bad that were used. And they all have their own personality. So this is actually a very employable skill set to be able to use whatever the assets are, the pictorial assets and what's called the copy or the text, and to blend them together into something that's effective. Not only is it effective in one format, if you understand and set up these assets correctly, you can redesign them into different formats. So to fit the aspect ratio of a TV, right? Or of a monitor. So there are 4 components that I'm hoping to see from you for assignment 6. And the first was text blocking. So text blocking, ideally you want to do it at the beginning of the process to figure out how to engage within a set format, in this case a 16 by 20 poster format, how to engage the viewer's eye movement to work around and with your spot illustration, right? But what if you don't have a text blocking sketch? What if you lost it? What if you never made it? How can you get it at this point? Because I want you all to acknowledge the importance of planning where your type goes before you start designing your type. Well, this is what you can do. You can open up your latest PSD file for assignment 6. So I'm going to open mine up. And I'm going to open that up in Photopea. But I'll do it in a new window. Remember, we always save as PSD so that it saves our layers. It's a working format, even though it's not one that you can put up to Canvas. Because we want all those layers. Those layers are how we control our assets for the project. And these projects get really big. So if you have Photoshop open, Illustrator open, you want them closed, you want to quit them. So this is my poster. This is what my finished poster looked like, right? But within this are all these different assets. Like the last thing I added were these little ellipses. Okay, what I can do is make a new layer on top of it. And then with my tablet, or even with my mouse, because these can be really loose, I'm going to pick a really bright color just so I can see it, like fluorescent green, which is an RGB color that doesn't work in CMYK. Make it a pretty big brush, just like when we were digitally inking out of Photopea. I can even smooth it out a little bit. And I'm just going to roughly sketch where my spot illustration goes, because it's the space that is taken up in the frame for my spot illustration. Okay. And then I'm going to take smoothing off because it's really slowing it down. And then I am going to just block out where the different text will go. And this is doing it after the fact. Not ideal, but it helps you understand how this design is working in terms of eye movement. So just these big blocks. That's why it's called text blocking or type blocking. For where your text and type fit around, over the top of, above, or underneath your spot illustration. You don't actually have to put your type in there. Sometimes type blocking will separate the blocks out for individual letter forms. But it's more important that you just understand the shapes involved. Okay, the last thing I'm going to do is just note that this is the spot illustration and that the rest is the text. Now, in most creative jobs, you are given the copy. You are told what type to use. So if I'm hired by McDonald's, I can maybe be hired to make some imagery that is interesting, but I'm going to have to include the type I'm loving it, somewhere in the design. So often you're given the text. In this case, for your project, you are able to create the text for yourself. Okay, then what do I do? The next step is just as important for type blocking. I need to show, let's see, I'll do it with a shape tool actually, just to make it easy. There we are. You need to show what the format is that your text blocking is working within. This is the design part, the problem solving part. So I'm going to turn this into a stroke rather than a fill. This is with my vector shape. And I'm going to make it a little bit bigger than 1 pixel so it's noticeable. And then instead of turning off every other layer, I'm just going to make a new layer behind that new text blocking sketch and fill it with white. So if you never did a text blocking sketch, this is how you can get credit for that requirement, right? Because it shows you how your text blocking actually worked on your poster. And you realize that had you done it earlier, it might have been easier for you to make good decisions about your poster. So these were my 2 text blocking sketches. And you notice I changed up my direction through working on it and activating that space in a more interesting way. And then, of course, for all of these requirements, except for the final poster, you can just submit it as a screen grab. And you do need to remember what a screen grab is for a Mac. It's Command-Shift-4 for a targeted screen grab. And then I'm going to grab it with the outside edge showing black so I can understand exactly how that poster and that border are working. All right, the next things you can do. The next requirement was the black type design. I posted optional inspiration here. This is showing conventions in Victorian, late 1800s type design, even though this is all done digitally. And they just did lots of things with text blocking and finding frames and ornate patterns. And it's just really fun to see the different character of the type and what it takes when it's inside different blocks. But the next requirement is the black vector type. And so we did this a few different ways. You can look in the past videos for how, but we use type tools within Photopea, and we also just hand drew. And then ultimately we brought it into Adobe Illustrator to turn it into a vector to bring it back into Photopea as black vector type. Because it's in Photopea and because it's a vector, what we're looking for is a layer that is a smart object that has never been rasterized. And then you're going to turn off all the other layers so we just see your black type design. And I often put them into groups. But there we go. There's my black type design right there. And I'm going to turn off every other layer. And now all I'm going to turn back on, just to make it clean, is that border, right? So this was my black type design. And if I felt like, well, this has some problems with it, it does. Look at the tangency of the I and the D. And I fix that at the end with the color type. But I don't necessarily need to fix it with the black type. But if I wanted to, this is allowed for black type design. I'm just going to add a white stroke around it, which is exactly what I did in the color version to solve that tangency problem of it touching at the edge. Right? And then that's going to work great. It's just I need to move this down below it. There we go. So now you see there's space given for it on all those overlaps. Next, I would save that. You can just do it again as a screen grab. Command-Shift-4. And I'm going to grab a little bit of that outside edge so I can see the overall 16 by 20 format that I'm working within, including the border. The next requirement is the color type solution, right? And the color type solution simply makes a copy of that black type, and you can see it right here. Come on, turn on. There we go. That adds layer styles. So I added color overlay, a gradient overlay, effects. And then was there anything else I added? Yes, I filled in these letters, right? And of course, I could always turn on my spot illustration. And you can add offsets. There's just lots that can be done. There we go. So this was my color type. Notice that the spot illustration is gone. You can either have it in there or not. What I like to do is to save it as a PNG so that if I wanted to put this up to Redbubble, this is its own kind of sticker design, t-shirt design, right? just like my spot illustration, but now it has text that goes with it.